We're talking about Christmas today specifically, and as an attention agency, I also wanted to give our thoughts about the general state, if you like, of the media world, of the pressures that we face as businesses. We've already heard from Mark talking about the pressures specifically of being a retailer at Christmas. I'm going to be talking about the pressures, I guess, of being a business that tries to operate not only at Christmas but also in the general media landscape that we find ourselves in 2016, and give you some thoughts, some ideas specific to Christmas that you might want to, again, try with your business to get noticed, to get in front of the right people, and ultimately to generate some sales and profit. So I'm going to look at a couple of things, but before I go into specifics, I want to just look at this thing of attention. For those of you that have known us in the last 13 years, you've probably seen us start from a very technical place and go into very much a digital marketing place, and now in 2016 we've rebranded as an attention agency. So where I'm coming from today is looking at a lot of digital techniques and tips, but thinking about people and thinking about how do we engage with people so they pay attention to us as businesses in what's an increasingly crowded world. And getting attention is very, very hard. There's very few points where I think we actually have our full focus and our full attention on one or two things, because we live in a world that's very, very fragmented. We have busy lives, we have lots of pressures both with our families, with our friends and with work. And so to give our full attention onto one or two things is very, very difficult. But there are a few exceptions. When I think back to the last 10 to 15 years, there's one thing that sticks out for me where I gave my full attention to something for a significant amount of time. And I've done this sort of version of this talk a few times before. How many people know who that guy is? Yeah? Name? Felix Baumgartner. Now, when he did this space jump back in, whenever it was, 2012, 13, 11, it was, to me, absolutely captivating, absolutely got my attention, and it made me stay in front of my laptop because I watched it live on YouTube for several hours. And what was I watching for those several hours? If you also watched it, most of the time was this grainy little dot floating through the sky with a counter on the bottom of the screen. That was it. And a commentary from him in the little pod, and other people down below, and other people adding on top of it. But we knew that something amazing was going to happen when Felix got to the edge of the atmosphere, and the pictures that came back when he got to the top and he took all his things, and he went through all his checks, and he stood at the edge of the world and jumped, was truly magical. It's probably the closest that our generation will get to that point of the moon landings, because these things don't happen very often. And to me, that was a massive thing that always sticks in my head and really did captivate me in a way that is very rarely happens. But we also see attention being grabbed, which is, I guess, the way we think about attention is it tends to be grabbing rather than awe-inspiring or really noteworthy. And a lot of attention I see these days tends to be revolving around figures like this, where we get attention by doing things that, I guess, sell your soul, or however you want to describe the Kardashians and their exploits. It works for them, and people notice them. And again, as an entity, the Kardashians have millions and millions and millions of comments every year, and people talk about them. There is different ways of getting attention. I want us to, as brands, as businesses, to be going for the more awe-inspiring than the drop your clothes and show your bum approach. And there's many ways of defining what attention is, but ultimately, it's about focusing on one particular idea, one particular task over a multitude of others. And if you're in a competitive business, which I guess all of you will find yourself in, finding the way to get your brand noticed amongst all of the other ones is ultimately, I guess, what we're trying to achieve as business owners, as marketing managers, or whatever your role is in trying to help your business succeed. So that's what definitions of attention. And why is our company trying to solve the problem of attention for businesses is because there is an attention problem. And the reason why there's an attention problem is multiple. It's not just down to one particular thing. But certainly things like technology and access to media are real barriers, if you like, to getting our brands noticed. If you think back to 30, 40 years ago, televisions used to come with maybe 2, 3, 4 channels, and then around the 90s there was a fifth channel, which was, wow, revolutionary. 5 channels of television. And in the 70s, the BBC used to have this test card that used to be shown either when transmission stopped for an error, or when it was just the end of the day and they all knocked off and went home. One of the favourite stories I tell about the BBC and the media world back in the 70s was there was a programme called the Old Grey Whistle Test, which those of you that are music buffs like myself will be aware of. And on the Friday, they used to show the Old Grey Whistle Test, and they have a band on, Led Zeppelin, Rory Gallagher, Pink Floyd, whoever it was, and it would show from 9 until 10:30 in the evening, which in the radio times is when the programme stopped. But because nothing came after it on Friday night, if the band were into a really good jam or they just wanted to carry on playing, they could carry on playing till 10:30, 11, 11:30. There was no restriction. It was just we pressed the button and we're on, and when we stopped pressing the button, we're off, and that was it. And television stopped on a Friday night. They didn't feel the need to just fill it with other stuff that they'd shown 3 weeks previously. That's how the media world worked. If you fast forward to 2016, you've probably seen many graphics which are similar to this, which basically illustrate that, as I got quoted the other day, a shitload of stuff happens. Millions of likes, millions of followers, millions of tweets, millions of plays, all of these figures are astronomically big, and they only get bigger every time someone creates one of these infographics. We live in a world where there is so much stuff to consume that you don't even know where to start. I myself struggle sometimes, because I'm very active on Twitter and I follow lots of people and I value their opinions, to struggle to consume all of the content that I think will be useful for me to read. And people come and sit next to me when I'm in the office and they say, how do you work with 30 different tabs? It's because I'm trying to read all those different tabs at some point in the future. But whilst there's lots and lots of information being produced, we as individuals also struggle to cope with all of that, and our behaviours have started to change quite significantly. We can't stop looking at our mobile phones, although I'm glad to see all of you currently, most of you aren't. And we check our phones usually about once an hour, sometimes even more. Do you know what the average number of times in a study that was done, I think a couple of years ago, suggested we check our phones on average per day? And some guesses from the audience? 30? 100? Hundreds? 400? That's a lot. Touching your phone. Well, yeah, define check. It's a difficult thing. But the number that they picked up was 150. So 150 times, on average, in the study, we check our phones. It could be picking it up, it could be unlocking it, whatever. If you think that most people sleep between 6 to 8 hours a night, that leaves about 16 hours awake time per day. 150 times is probably 10 times an hour, or every 5-6 minutes. That's a lot. I would classify almost that as addiction. The act of doing something when it's actually detrimental to your own self or your own well-being is addiction. And that's almost where it comes to, where people get done almost every day for checking their phone while they're driving or sending messages, all these things we shouldn't be doing, yet we do still do them. And actually physically that's had an impact on us, because we outsource a lot of our mental capacity to computers as well. Why do I need to remember stuff when I can just write it down on my phone? I can check my phone at any point. There have been studies done on taxi drivers, and if you know about taxi drivers in London, they know this thing called the knowledge, which is basically where they can remember almost every route and every road in London, and it's an incredible thing when you know the knowledge. And they've done studies on these taxi drivers, and they've found that the parts of their brain that are storing long-term information actually grow over a period of time, because they use the long-term memory and they can access it, and it actually physically changes the shape of their brain. But when we check our phones so regularly and we rely on our internet over there to do all of our stuff, I imagine that actually having the opposite effect on our brain. So we have to be quite careful, not only in terms of our own long-term brain capacity, but also our attention spans. And another study that was done a few years ago by Microsoft, and they've done this over about a 15-year period, looked at attention spans of people. The average attention span of a person back in 2002, 2003 was around, I think, 11 or 12 seconds, maybe even been longer. When they ran the same study in 2013, 2014, the attention span of an average human being had been reduced from about 12 to 13 seconds down to about 7 seconds. Now, the reason why I have a picture of a goldfish is because that now puts us below a goldfish in terms of our attention span, which is around 8 seconds. Now, these are all averages, these are all studies independently, and whilst I'm not standing here calling you all goldfish today, There's certainly something that we need to just sort of look into ourselves and say, actually, are we behaving in the right way? Or are we adapting our marketing and our communications to a world in which we have an attention span which is supposedly less than a goldfish? Because I don't think that we actually have, and hopefully some of the things I'm going to talk about will make you change the way that you do things. And why have we got attention spans like goldfishes? Our attentions have been effectively shredded thanks to technology, thanks to being able to access our mobile phones at any point. And this is a typical day's worth of activity studied in America, which I think basically would apply to the UK, where they look at how much stuff we consume, activity we do per day. And on average, we consume, or we do 31 hours of stuff in 24 hours. Something doesn't add up there. That's not just me, is it? Why is it 31 hours and not 24 in a 24-hour period? Because we multitask and we take lots of different pieces of information in at different parts of the day, and they will overlap each other. How many people in the room, honestly, have in the last week sat and watched television without having their phone in their hand and we're looking at a phone at the same time? We actually just watched television. About a third. Interesting. And was that Andy Murray? Yeah, it was for me. I actually put my phone down for these 2 hours. Because we live in a world where we can access anything at any point. And that time of standing in the queue at the post office, just thinking to ourselves, what am I going to have for tea tonight, are now no longer spent doing that. They're spent checking our phone. I've not checked my email for the last 36 seconds. I better check it again just to make sure there's nothing else come in. My Facebook feed, whatever else. All those micro moments are usually spent consuming media rather than just doing stuff. And someone far more powerful or intelligent than myself summarised this very, very well. This is the new CEO of Microsoft. He said that we're moving from a world where computing power is very scarce to a place where now it's basically limitless, and where the true scarce commodity is our human attention. There's only a finite amount of stuff I can look at, and whilst I can say here's 31 hours of stuff we do, really there's going to be a peak where actually we can't take any more in, or I scan it and I don't actually really give it my full attention. And when we think about the online experience, our attentions are increasingly being trod on, not really respected, and the experience is actually becoming very fragmented. When you think about what advertisers do, there's a very good quote from a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk. He said, there's one thing that's guaranteed in life is that when marketeers get involved, they'll screw it up somehow. And I think that's partly true, not obviously in ourselves, but in large, where basically advertising is unwanted. No one wants to go on Facebook and see ads, really. They go on Facebook to check their friends' updates and see what the world's happening. So if you are going to advertise, make sure you're adding some value, make sure you're doing it properly, rather than just chucking some stuff in front of someone in the vain hope that one day they might click and do something with it. So what ends to happen is you get the sort of the Ricky Gervais effect, where we sort of feel it's in our rights to sort of turn up and just be a bit of an arse, when actually we should be respecting the person, respecting their journey and trying to help them rather than intrude. And I get really, really frustrated when I see things like this. Well, I go onto Twitter, I find something useful, I go onto Google, I find something I'm looking for, and within a split second, a pop-up box arrives on the page saying, fill in your email address for some exclusive content and news, when I've not actually read the thing I'm actually looking to find out about. This happens on small websites and big websites. It's mind-boggling. The first thing I do is look for the X and click it. So you do the same thing? Do you actually use these things?
Sometimes, yeah.
Occasionally. Yeah, good. I think they can have a purpose, but certainly not within a split second. Sometimes they take over your whole mobile phone. You'll be scrolling through a page, and then the page or the browser will stop. You get the big full advert. This isn't my phone, by the way. And it just takes over your page. Or sometimes you've read some good content, and at the bottom, you see some stuff that's there to try and scare you or get you to click on some other stuff. A great guy, John Battelle, if you've not heard of him, he wrote a really good book about Google and search. He said at the end, it basically, devalues the content that you're reading. If you're reading some really interesting stuff about the Brexit or the leadership battle, do you want to know about your ankle causing you a heart attack? Probably not. It's not why I'm there. So our attention is being split, it's being fragmented, and I think as businesses we should be aiming for better and doing better. And especially at a time of Christmas where people are in a sort of different mindset. I think Mark talked about the Christmas mood of getting the Christmas spirit. We all sort of change our mindsets from November, December, to think about things differently. And what I'm going to talk about is 5 different things I think businesses could look at in order to try and get attention and be more attention worthy at a time when it's probably most critical for most people to have that mindset. And I'm taking some ideas here from this thing we have called the attention model, which we are trying to evolve, trying to work with our clients and trying to really nail down ourselves. But there's some ideas in here that we are playing around with, which is about exploring the brands and the companies we work with in as much detail as we can, and speaking to their customers, speaking to their customers, doing some online research, etc., learning about them, and then trying to create content that will ultimately captivate, maybe not to the Felix Baumgartner level that Red Bull did, but doing something that captivates those people for a period of time, whether it's a second, 10 seconds, 10 minutes, 10 days. And then try and create something which we will learn from and just go through the process as best we can. So Christmas time is it's very important. It happens once a year. And it's something that I always think about this guy at Christmas time. Father Christmas is probably the pinnacle of it. People seem to think that Coca-Cola invented Father Christmas. I don't know if you've heard that story before. In the 1930s, they really leaned on this guy. He was the first face of Christmas, although actually reading about it in some more depth, it actually comes from some 4th century guy who used to wear red and give presents out. But anyway, Coca-Cola was supposed to be the start of Christmas, but isn't quite. But as the UK adopts technology, certainly we've adopted it more than anyone else, almost in the world. As a nation, whether it's down to our reservedness that we can't actually talk to people, so we'd rather sit in front of a screen and not interact, or just the fact that we're a small island, it's easy to stick lots of masts in everywhere to get everything connected, I don't know. But certainly we are the biggest shoppers online and biggest adopters of technology, which is great. And also, we're spending more and more of our money online at Christmas time. So the red line is the trend, but you'll notice the big peaks. I guess this is a reflection of Mark's sales of the last 10 years. As a percentage of our GDP, of the spend that we do, it's increasingly going online, it's increasingly going on Christmas. One of the sad things, I guess, that comes from that is that 24-hour access is that on Christmas Day, we don't actually spend it with our family so much anymore. And there's been a few stats that basically say Christmas Day is one of the busiest days for online shopping. Is that because people open with their presents and then they think, I don't like them, and therefore at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when everyone's fallen asleep because having too many mince pies and brandy butter, they then go and start shopping, or they got money from their family? I don't know what the reasons, but certainly Christmas Day is a massive day itself for shopping. Maybe Mark can share some ideas on that. And it's because, as I say, we are always on our phone. We're always looking at our phones. On Christmas Day, you get the random text messages, you go on Facebook, etc., etc. It's never away from us, and it never really leaves us. So this concept of digital, to me, doesn't really exist anymore. It's just the world. But yet some businesses haven't really adapted to this new world, and they don't seem to treat digital and store and print as one thing. They still seem to see them as silos. So I've got some thoughts around that. My first is basically, when you're thinking about businesses doing business at Christmas time, it needs to be seamless. You shouldn't have to think about, does this voucher, does this code, does this offer work offline? Can I do it online? Are people going to find out? Can we price one thing, another? It needs to be seamless. And I keep thinking back to, from my own experience with my wife, she shops a lot at this place. If you've never heard of it, neither had I until 5 years ago. They sell lots of nice baby clothes. She gets vouchers through the post for being a very loyal customer, which is great, as my bank balance will tell you. But sometimes when those vouchers come through in the post, she then can't go onto the website and buy the things that she wants because the voucher doesn't work on the website. It only works in the store. Now at Christmas time, people don't have time to go into a store, find out it doesn't work, and then go back online again, or vice versa. It has to be seamless. The user experience, the user journey, should just be treating a store and every other touch point you've got as one. And this may sound very, very obvious, but for companies like this, it still seems to be an issue. So if you have a shop front, if you sell something to people and you sell it online and you sell it through mobile and an app or whatever it is, try and make that experience as simple, as easy as you can. And this doesn't apply just to kids, because there's kids that do this sort of stuff. We all use mobile phones. We all use smart tablet devices. It's a nice chart basically says that, every age group is using these things. Yes, it is the millennials or the younger people that tend to use those smartphones more, but there is still a huge and growing each year number of people in the over 50s category, if I can be so derogatory, that are using these devices and will also expect the same thing. So listen to people, make sure that things work online and offline. It seems obvious because really, as I say, from the customer perspective, it is just one channel and it should just work in one seamless way. So if it doesn't, for your business, think about how you can make that happen, as I say, at the most critical time possible. Nick did a wonderful talk earlier on talking about gifting. Christmas really is a time to give. And those are just my thoughts or Nick's thoughts. It's the thoughts of Sir Cliff. In Mistletoe and Wine, he said, it's a time for giving. And it certainly is. And as businesses, I think there's probably an opportunity for us to give something back as well. Lots of examples from big companies and small companies alike, where they've done campaigns around the Christmas giving theme. And it seems an obvious thing, but really I don't think we can underdo it or overdo it, because really, if there's any time to give or any time to give something away, whether it's promotional, whether it's for charity, it's really Christmas time. So Sainsbury's did a really good thing where you can dare to share. You can, I think you can create a list of items, and then you can share the list with your friends. Some of them can then vote, and then they can then have those parcels sent to you. Waitrose tried to tap into a bit more of the British Bake Off thing by getting people to bake it forward. Instead of paying it forward, you'd bake a gift for someone, give it to them as a Christmas gift, and then by them receiving it, hopefully it encourages them to then do the same thing. And so you give, rather than the gift of a £10 voucher or something that you've bought, you actually take the time, you give attention to something which is valuable to you and to them, and bake it forward. The unfortunate thing with the Waitrose campaign is they launched this campaign as someone else in America, which is a charity, so the Bake It Forward hashtag got used by two different people for slightly different purposes at the same time. At the time where I guess sometimes we see giving things as can be quite frivolous, or do I need to buy Auntie Betty another pair of shoes or another candle or another soap? Giving to charities does actually change lives, and again for businesses wanting to seem perhaps altruistic or showing their caring side, it's a great time to be doing that. The Salvation Army have done lots of stuff online that's been very successful. And it doesn't have to be Christmas. There's whole businesses now get made by giving. I don't know if any of you have heard of Tom. Some of you may even be wearing Tom shoes. But with, again, the younger audience, despite Nike's massive multi-billion pounds worth of investment in marketing and sponsoring sports stars, people are now choosing Toms because of their ethical beliefs and their ethical views of when you buy a pair of Tom shoes, we give another pair to someone else that doesn't have any shoes. And I think there's an opportunity there, again, at Christmas time to tap into some of those things that hopefully aren't too gimmicky, but actually show you that your value that you're giving back to the community in which you operate. Another trend which I thought was really interesting, and again I can relate to this as a parent for 3 times over, is the slow it down movement. I've talked a lot about checking our phones every 5 minutes and accessing everything and everywhere, but there's also a trend, and I think Mark always touched about as well, about having the ability to just touch stuff. Digital's great and it's got a place, and we're used to the internet now, but people have taken as a movement growing called the slow movement. And if you think back to last year, some of you may have watched this reindeer. It wasn't a documentary, it was just for 2 hours over Christmas. BBC Two showed a camera on the back of some reindeers. Did anyone see it? Yeah. Nothing happened. It was just a camera on the back of a reindeer going through, I think it was Iceland or Greenland or somewhere, and that was it. But it gave us the opportunity to stop, to slow down, to just appreciate some simple things in life. And this tangibleness, if you like, the slowing down, is coming through in different places. Vinyl records have had their biggest sales year in 29 years in 2015, I think, because people want to touch the music that they're listening to. They want to involve themselves and give attention to it more than just pressing a button on their phone. What I haven't shown here, by the way, is the graph was up on the ceiling 2 decades ago. So the growth is still small, but it is growing. Books are making a bit of a comeback as well. We never really stopped buying books, but when the Kindle became massively popular 5, 6, 7 years ago, it really did hurt the traditional booksellers. And people like Waterstones and whatever the other ones were all started to really suffer. But now, the last 2 or 3 years, they're actually making a comeback. Why? Because the physical act of giving somebody a book that they can touch and feel and flick through and write on is a nice thing. It doesn't need to be a digital thing. The slow it down movement also affects adults in different ways. You know, I find the whole idea of colouring books for adults quite odd. I do a lot of them with my children, but there are now colouring in books for adults because, again, they don't want to be looking at a screen. They don't want to be doing the stuff they do from 9 till 9 in their work days. They want to switch off and touch stuff and unwind. So if you're a business that operates online, just solely online, perhaps there's an opportunity for you to do something more tangible or physical at Christmas where someone can actually touch some of the things that you do rather than just have another email or another web page or another social thing sent to them. The fourth idea I've got about, again, getting a Christmas attention is about rewarding people. Obviously, Christmas is a time where if you've been a good boy, then you get your presents. If you've been a bad boy, then you won't. I look forward to implementing this with my children in the coming years. But I was at a talk a couple of weeks ago, and basically I thought I would lift a lot of those ideas, which basically looks at customer lifetime value. And I don't know if any of you have ever really done this, something we do sporadically, if you like, at Adido. But it's basically looking at how often people buy from you, how much do they buy, and how recently have they bought from you. And if you're a retailer, I think this is really, really interesting exercise. RFM has got all sorts of stuff published. IBM have got a whole little suite of products. There's Excel spreadsheets you can download, etc., etc. But it basically says if you've got a database of people in your database who've bought from you before, split them into groups of 5 in terms of how recently they've bought from you. So make those pots equally split, 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%. And then take that 20% maybe as box 3 and split them again into 20%. Based on how often they buy from you. And then take that box, which is a 3-3 or a 3-5, and split it again by how much they've spent. So your best customers will be 5-5-5 because they've spent from you a lot, they bought from you a lot, they bought from you very often, they bought from you very recently. People that are in the lower numbers, the 1-1-1s, the 1-2-1s, the 3-1-2s, whatever combination you want to come up with, those are the ones that you need working on. If they're 5-5-5, why are they 5-5-5? If in this instance there's a database of 3,000 people, you've got 25 people in that box. You could spend quite a lot of time asking them questions, phoning them up, sending them emails with questions on them, whatever it is to engage them, understand their thought processes, to then find more of those types of people. And if they're in the lower box, why are they in the lower box? And again, try and understand your audience. Understand your audience is really, really important. So if you go through that exercise, it can be quite enlightening. And at Christmas time, it's probably a good idea to show the love of those guys. If they are your best customers who buy from you all the time and they buy very regularly, send them stuff for free in the post. They'll tweet about it. They'll put it on Facebook. They'll give the love back. It shows real loyalty and a really good time of year. And it'll get cut through as well. If they're low-ranking customers, maybe tempt them back with some offers or say that you miss them. Here's a Christmas offer. Whatever it is, you can use good language. Know your break-even point. Some of these boxes will have more value than others, so if they might not buy from you very often, but they buy high value, they may be worth more than the converse. So test where those people are good and bad, and find that 20% who probably generate 80% of your revenue. If you want to target these people back with stuff, then there's a really good way, again, if you're a retailer, to do that. Facebook has got a massive amount of options where you can upload an email address of somebody and it can match them in Facebook. And you could create very specific segments based on a 5-5-5 or 5-4-5 or whatever number of the box, give them a specific message and a specific offer and a specific landing page to really grab their attention and take them through an experience that's tailored towards them. It doesn't have to cost a lot of time or money. It's just sitting down and thinking about how do you target those people more effectively. Twitter also has very similar things. It doesn't have to be based on people you know, but it could be lookalikes, it could be the television programs you know they're interested in. Whatever it is, there's ways to market those. And also within your own CRM systems. A lot of these things now have automation tools in them, or automation platforms where you can create a set of rules. If they've bought recently but they didn't spend a lot of money, send them this offer or send them an email on this point. So you can automate a lot of these things once you understand how well they work. And the final thing I think is really just to think about planning ahead as often as you can. And it feels a bit silly to put this slide up to yourselves because obviously you've taken the time to come out of your busy days in the middle of July to think about Christmas, but lots of people still don't. And we get lots of people coming to us in October or September with briefs to say, I want to capitalise on Christmas. And we look and go, well, it's got 62 days and you've not even thought about any content and it's a bit late. So for businesses, thinking about when does Christmas start as early as you possibly can. This shows the e-commerce revenue from, I can't remember where, I think it was a stats company that basically showed when we start buying stuff and how much we're spending. So really around the end of November, around the Black Friday, around the Cyber Monday as well is another one, is when we will start spending our money, and when it comes towards the sort of the cut-off point for the deliveries is when we tend to stop. Obviously, some of these companies will get much quicker with their deliveries, so that line may start pushing across. But one of the things that came out of the report was that from Black Friday through to Christmas, typically sees between 50 and 100% more revenue than the days beforehand. So there is really that, as Mark said, that 4-week period as much as possible. And this also has an effect on Black Friday. So Black Friday is the centre. There's some pre-build up where there's some pre-offers. There's also some post-offers people do, which is a Cyber Monday type thing. This is where the traffic tends to happen and where we see the spikes. One thing to note about that, obviously, if your business is selling online and targeting these types of peaks, does your infrastructure hold up to the tremendous spikes that you may or may not get? One of the things that we spend a lot of time on internally is actually getting our infrastructure right, so that if there is a massive peak and a massive burst, our servers can expand and cope with it. And we still speak to lots of clients where that isn't the case and their sites will fall over quite a lot. Another piece of research which looked at sales suggested that actually November is the new December. And there's been some studies between the trends that's happened in different types of industries. There's been some huge swings as to when actually sales happen. So I talked about planning ahead. November can be, for some businesses, just as busy as December. So that period can be elongated. And whilst you can try and plan, you can use some tools like Hootsuite. You can use Buffer to create all these tweets and these posts and these content pieces and schedule them all out. That's very good and that's very diligent and that's very worthy. And we'd recommend that to everyone. There still needs to be that moment of, oh my God, what the hell's happening? We need to react and jump on it as well. So you need to find the balance between planning and just listening to what's going on and being effective. Final things to think about in terms of the content you're producing. Attention spans, as I say, are shortening. We don't have as much time to listen to content or take it all in. A guy we were very lucky to have speak at the conference that we held in April, Richard Shotton, did some analysis, or did some thoughts, and basically said that people don't have a lot of attention, and we know that. So if that's the case, we need to really seek out those moments where people are giving their full attention to something, like perhaps being in the gym, or being at the cinema where I'm focused on this thing for 30, 60 minutes, or we just basically accept that people aren't really going to be paying as much attention as we think or we would like, and therefore we need to make our copy and our messaging much, much more simpler. And again, that sounds pretty obvious, but in some other studies that he did, he found that really nothing has changed in the last 5 years, despite the fact our attention spans are shortening and we're doing so much stuff. TV ads are still the same length. Our ads for outdoor stuff is still the same. Our print headlines are still basically the same. So that gives us a massive advantage to you in the room today and anyone else who's prepared to listen and take this on board to get through the noise and cut through that messaging problem that we've got by just being really, really simple and really, really clear. So some final thoughts. Don't treat all of your customers the same. I think that extends to all throughout the year, but certainly at Christmas, reward the best ones, give them stuff, give them some reasons to love you, give them some reasons to talk about you online, and work on everyone else. Second thing, there is no digital. Make that experience with your customer as seamless as possible, because they won't see the distinction between a mobile site that's got a slight problem with it or something in the store. It's just the same thing, it's just your brand. So don't frustrate them, make it as seamless as possible. Try and connect with your users at the right time and the right place. Using Facebook, using Twitter, using other media, there is the opportunity to connect with people at the right moments. And if you understand those 555s, or you've done customer research, when are you most likely to pay attention? When are you not busy? When are you not with the kids? When is that period I can really get you? And you've got the opportunity to really hone in on those minutes or hours that work the best. And just be utterly simple with your messaging, because we as marketeers sometimes get stuck in, everyone thinks in the way that marketeers do. Well, we don't, we're just people. And we just need to listen and open our minds and be as simple as we can with how we talk to people. And finally, have fun. Christmas is there to be enjoyed. We should be enjoying it. Share the love, share the happiness, share the Glühwein, I think. So on that note, thank you very much for listening, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them now.